Owen Blake watched through the cracked viewport as Earth became smaller and smaller, just another blue dot among millions of stars. His reflection stared back at him, a tired man with gray in his beard and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Behind him, 300 people tried to sleep in corridors that smelled like sweat and recycled air. They had lost everything, and now they were losing their home too. The Sovereign Council had been clear in their judgment. Humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too young to be part of the galactic community. The rebellion had been the final excuse they needed. It didn't matter that only a few thousand humans had actually fought. It didn't matter that most of Earth had opposed the violence. The elder species had made their decision, and elder species did not change their minds. Owen moved through the ship's narrow passages, checking on his people. The Wandering Star had been a colony transport once, designed to carry settlers to new worlds in comfort. Now it was a prison ship without bars, taking the condemned into exile. The life support systems wheezed and clicked, working far beyond their intended capacity. Every wall bore scratches and dents from where families had carved out tiny spaces to call their own. In the engineering section, Iris Chen sat cross-legged beneath a mass of exposed wiring, her tools spread around her like prayer offerings. She had been Earth's youngest chief engineer before the exile, recruited at 23 for her ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. Now she spent 18 hours a day keeping their dying ship alive. How bad is it? Owen asked. Iris didn't look up from her work. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, splicing connections that should have been replaced years ago. The main reactor is stable for now, but the secondary systems are failing. We're losing atmosphere faster than the scrubbers can compensate. Food synthesizers are running at 40% capacity. Water recycling is compromised in sections 7 through 12. Can you fix it? I can delay it. She finally met his eyes and he saw the exhaustion there. I can't perform miracles, Owen. This ship was never meant to support this many people for this long. We need to land somewhere soon. Owen nodded slowly. He had known this was coming, but hearing it said aloud made it real. The Council has sent warnings to every system within 100 light years. No one will take us. We're marked as criminals, exiles, dangerous. Then we find somewhere they haven't warned. Iris returned to her work, her voice steady despite the impossible situation. An unclaimed system. A dead world. Anywhere we can touch down and breathe without suffocating. In the medical bay, David Okonkwo moved between patients with quiet efficiency. Before the exile, he had run a hospital that treated anyone who walked through its doors, regardless of their ability to pay. That compassion had marked him as a sympathizer when the rebellion started, even though he had never raised a weapon. He had tried to save lives on both sides, and both sides had called him a traitor for it. A young girl coughed in her sleep, her face pale and thin. Malnutrition was becoming common among the children. Their growing bodies needed more than the ship could provide. David checked her vitals and adjusted her IV, then made notes in his rapidly shrinking supply of medication. At this rate, they would run out of antibiotics in 3 weeks. After that, even simple infections could kill. Doctor. A woman approached, holding her son's hand. The boy was maybe 7 years old with fever-bright eyes. He's been sick for 2 days. Please. David guided them to an examination area, his mind already calculating how much medicine he could spare. Every dose he gave to one patient was a dose he couldn't give to another. These were the choices exile forced upon them. These were the decisions that kept him awake at night. In the hydroponics bay, Lena Vasquez knelt among dying plants, trying to coax life from systems that were never designed for such intensive use. She had been working on drought-resistant crops for arid regions when the exile came. Now she was trying to feed 300 people with equipment meant for 50. The grow lights flickered, another sign of the ship's failing power grid. Come on, she whispered to a wilting tomato plant. Just a little longer. Just grow, but the plant didn't listen. None of them did. They needed more light, more nutrients, more of everything the ship couldn't give. Lena had managed to keep them from starving so far, but her success felt temporary. Eventually, the math would catch up with them. Eventually, they would run out of time. Owen called a meeting that evening in what used to be the ship's recreation area. Representatives from each section gathered, their faces showing the same exhaustion he felt. These were teachers and engineers, doctors and farmers, people who had never wanted to be refugees. They had wanted ordinary lives, but the galaxy had decided they didn't deserve even that. "We've received responses to our asylum requests," Owen said. He didn't need to tell them the responses were rejections. They could see it in his posture. "The Tarvine Collective says we're unwelcome. The Mirian Assembly has closed its borders to human ships. The Quellan Diplomatic Corps sent a formal apology but offered no aid. So we're on our own," someone said. "We've always been on our own," Owen replied. "But Iris has found something. An unclaimed system far from Council space. There's a moon there orbiting a gas giant. It has an atmosphere. Barely breathable, but breathable. Surface temperature averages minus 200 degrees. But the planet has geothermal vents. We could survive there." "Survive isn't living," another voice protested. "No," Owen agreed, "but it's a chance. It's more than we have here, drifting until our ship falls apart around us." The vote was quiet and quick. They had no real choice, and everyone knew it. The wandering star changed course, pointing its nose toward a system with no name, only coordinates. Toward a frozen moon that nobody wanted. Toward whatever future exiles could build with their own hands. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Owen stood at the viewport again. Earth was gone now, lost in the infinite dark. Ahead lay only uncertainty and cold, but somewhere in that cold was a place they could stand, a place they could call their own, if they could just survive long enough to reach it. The wind screamed across the ice like something alive and angry. Lena pressed herself against the cave entrance, watching the storm tear across Frosthold's surface with winds that could strip flesh from bone. This was the third major storm in 5 days, and each one seemed worse than the last. Through the howling white chaos, she could barely see the wandering star, half buried in snowdrifts that had accumulated since their landing 2 weeks ago. Inside the caves, the settlement clung to survival by threads so thin they might snap at any moment. The ice walls glowed with bioluminescent moss they had discovered growing in the deeper tunnels, providing just enough light to see by without wasting precious power. 300 people occupied a network of caves that dripped constantly as body heat melted the ceiling, creating a steady rhythm of water drops that never stopped. Iris had set up her workshop in the largest cavern, surrounded by parts salvaged from the ship. She worked without pause, connecting salvaged heating units to the geothermal vents they had found deeper underground. Her hands were raw and bleeding from the cold, wrapped in torn cloth because they had run out of proper gloves days ago. Every breath came out as white fog, even here where the vents provided some warmth. "The main heating grid is holding," she reported to Owen, not looking up from her work. "But we're losing pressure in sections 4 and 5. I need more sealant, more insulation, more everything we don't have." Owen crouched beside her, his own hands shaking from cold despite the thermal suit he wore. The suit was one of only 12 they had, reserved for those who had to go outside. Everyone else made do with layered clothing and shared body heat. "What if we cannibalize more of the ship? We've already taken everything we can without compromising its structure," Iris said. "If we take more, the whole thing might collapse. We might need it if we have to evacuate." "Evacuate to where?" Owen asked quietly. Iris had no answer for that. There was nowhere else to go. This frozen hell was their home now, whether they liked it or not. In the medical cave, David had converted a natural alcove into a makeshift hospital. 16 people lay on pallets made from ship padding, suffering from frostbite, hypothermia, and respiratory infections caused by the thin, cold air. He moved between them with what remained of his medical supplies, knowing that each bandage and each dose of medicine brought them closer to having nothing at all. A man named Peter had lost 3 fingers to frostbite during yesterday's supply run to the ship. David had amputated them with tools meant for repairing electronics, using the last of their anesthetic to dull the pain. Peter hadn't complained, hadn't cried out. He had just stared at the cave ceiling and asked if he would be able to work again. That was what they had become, people who measured their worth by whether they could still be useful. "Doctor, you need to see this." One of David's assistants, a former veterinarian named Ruth, gestured to a young woman lying near the back of the cave. Her breathing came in short, painful gasps, and her lips had turned blue. David recognized the signs immediately. Pneumonia, complicated by the cold and the thin atmosphere. On Earth, this would have been treatable with antibiotics and a warm bed. Here he had 3 antibiotic doses left and nowhere warm to put her. He administered the medicine anyway, knowing it probably wouldn't be enough. "We can't keep living like this," Ruth whispered. "We're not dying quickly, but we're dying. David wanted to argue, wanted to offer hope, but he was too tired to lie. She was right. They were dying by degrees, losing people one at a time to cold and illness and despair. In the food cave, Lena stood before her failing garden with tears freezing on her cheeks. She had tried everything to keep the plants alive in this frozen darkness. She had rigged grow lights powered by the geothermal generators. She had created soil from organic waste and ice cave minerals. She had talked to the plants, encouraged them, begged them to grow. But the cold was too much. The darkness was too complete. One by one, her plants withered and died. A small boy approached her, no more than 6 years old. His name was Simon, and he had been asking about the plants every day since they arrived. "Are they going to make food soon?" Lena forced a smile she didn't feel. "Soon, sweetie. They just need a little more time." But time was the one thing they didn't have. Their food supplies from the ship were calculated to last 3 months if rationed carefully. 6 weeks had already passed, and the rations grew smaller every day. Lena could do the math. She knew what was coming. That evening, Owen called a meeting in the main cavern. The entire settlement gathered, their breath creating clouds of fog that rose toward the dripping ceiling. They looked like ghosts, pale and thin, wrapped in whatever clothing they could layer together. Some of the children had stopped playing. That frightened Owen more than anything else. When children stopped playing, it meant hope was dying. "I won't lie to you," Owen began. "Things are bad. Our supplies are running low. The cold is getting worse as we move into this moon's winter season. We're losing people to illness and injury faster than we can help them." Silence met his words. They knew all of this already. They lived it every day. "Some of you have suggested we try to leave to find another world." Owen continued. "But the wandering star doesn't have enough fuel for another jump. Even if it did, we have nowhere to go. Every civilized system has closed its borders to us. So we just wait here to die?" Someone shouted. It was Marcus, a former teacher who had lost his wife to hypothermia last week. "Is that what you're telling us?" "I'm telling you we survive," Owen replied, his voice firm. "We adapt, we endure. We prove that humanity doesn't need the Council's permission to exist." "Pretty words don't keep people warm," Marcus shot back. "Pretty words don't feed hungry children." Owen had no response to that. Marcus was right. Leadership couldn't create food from nothing, couldn't make the cold less deadly, couldn't change the fact that they were trapped on a world that wanted them dead. That night, as Lena tried to sleep in a corner shared with 5 other people, she heard crying from somewhere in the darkness, quiet, muffled sobs that spoke of loss and fear. She didn't try to find the source. She had heard crying every night since they landed. Sometimes it was adults, sometimes it was children. Sometimes, she realized, it was her. The next morning, the sensors they had placed around the settlement detected something impossible. A ship was approaching Frosthold, descending through the atmosphere toward their location. Iris confirmed the readings 3 times, certain she had made a mistake. But the readings were clear. Someone else had come to this frozen wasteland. Someone who might be friend or enemy, savior or threat. Owen suited up and went outside to wait, standing in the screaming wind as the ship grew larger in the gray sky. Behind him, in the caves, 300 people held their breath and wondered if this was rescue or if it was the end. Either way, their isolation was over. For better or worse, they were no longer alone. The Drin ship landed 3 miles from the human settlement, its engines melting the ice in great steaming circles. David watched from the cave entrance as figures emerged from the vessel, moving with a grace that seemed impossible in the howling wind. They were tall, perhaps 7 feet, with bodies covered in scales that shifted between blue and silver. 4 arms moved in coordinated patterns as they surveyed the frozen landscape, and their eyes, large and golden, missed nothing. Owen led a small group across the ice to meet them. David insisted on coming, as did Iris and 2 others named Frank and Rachel who had military training before the exile. They carried no weapons because they had none to carry. If these newcomers meant harm, resistance would be pointless anyway. The lead Drin stepped forward, raising all 4 hands in what might have been a gesture of peace. When he spoke, his voice came through a translator device that rendered his words in flat, emotionless tones. "I am Rethis Kavor, captain of the Silverwind. We detected your settlement from orbit. We did not expect to find humans this far from Council space." "We didn't expect to be here either," Owen replied. "We're exiles. The council decided humanity was too dangerous for the galaxy. Rethus tilted his head in a gesture that might have been understanding. The Drin know something of exile. The council cast us out 43 years ago, when we refused to surrender our defensive capabilities. They said we were too militaristic, too aggressive, too unwilling to submit to their wisdom. The words hung in the freezing air between them. Two species, both rejected, both condemned to the fringes of civilized space. David saw something shift in Rethus's golden eyes, a recognition of shared suffering. "You are struggling to survive here," Rethus observed. It wasn't a question. The half-buried ship and desperate settlement told the story clearly enough. "We're managing," Owen said, though the lie was obvious. "No," Rethus replied simply. "You are dying. I have seen settlements like yours before. The cold will take you all within 3 months, perhaps less." He gestured to his ship with two of his hands. "We have thermal generators, food synthesizers, atmospheric processors, technology designed for hostile environments. We can offer some of these things." Owen's jaw tightened. "What do you want in return?" "Information." Rethus's scales rippled, a pattern David couldn't interpret. "The council keeps detailed records of all ship movements, trade routes, patrol schedules. You are recently exiled. You may know things we need to know. Also, there is another matter." He turned and made a gesture. Two younger Drin approached, moving slowly and carefully. David's medical training kicked in immediately. He could see the tremors in their limbs, the slight dragging of their lower arms, the way their scales had lost their luster. "They are sick," Rethus said quietly. "A genetic condition that affects 1 in 100 of our people. Our medicine can slow the progression, but not stop it. We have heard that human medicine approaches illness differently, that you find solutions where others see only inevitability." David stepped forward, his professional curiosity overriding his caution. "May I examine them?" Rethus nodded, and David approached the two young Drin. He guessed they were adolescents, though it was hard to judge alien physiology. Their breathing was labored, and their body temperature was lower than it should be, based on what he could observe. He asked questions through Rethus's translator, building a picture of symptoms that seemed to point toward a neurological condition affecting their motor control. "I would need to run tests," David said. "I would need samples, equipment I don't have, time to study Drin biology. But I'm willing to try." "Even though we are strangers?" Rethus asked. "Even though helping us benefits you nothing?" David met the alien captain's golden eyes. "I'm a doctor. Helping people is what I do, regardless of what they look like or where they come from." Something shifted in Rethus's posture, a subtle relaxation that spoke of trust beginning to form. "Then we have the basis for cooperation. Come, let me show you what we have brought." Over the following days, the two settlements began to merge. The Drin brought 3 portable thermal generators that warmed the caves to temperatures where humans could work without their hands going numb. They provided food synthesizers that could convert basic proteins into nutritious meals, ending the immediate threat of starvation. In return, Owen shared everything he knew about recent council movements, trade routes, and patrol patterns. Iris spent hours with the Drin engineers, fascinated by their technology. They built everything to last, designing for redundancy and durability rather than efficiency. Their thermal generators were 3 times larger than human equivalents, but could run for decades without maintenance. Their atmospheric processors were crude by human standards but nearly indestructible. "You build things that can be repaired," Iris observed, examining a processor's internal structure. "We build things that need to be replaced." A Drin engineer whose name translated to Swift Builder rippled his scales in what Iris had learned was amusement. When you are exiled from the supply chains of civilization, durability becomes more important than elegance. We learned this lesson harshly. They began to collaborate, combining human innovation with Drin durability. Iris designed a more efficient thermal distribution system. Swift Builder showed her how to make it repairable with common materials. Together they created something neither species could have made alone. David converted a portion of the caves into a proper medical facility with equipment provided by the Drin. He spent long hours studying the 2 sick adolescents, whose names translated to quick swimming and far seeing. Their condition fascinated and frustrated him. It was clearly genetic, affecting the neural pathways that controlled motor function, but the Drin nervous system was fundamentally different from human biology. Rethus often sat with David during these examinations, watching silently. My daughter had this condition, he said quietly one day. She died 7 years ago. The medicine slowed her decline but could not stop it. I watched her lose the ability to walk, to grasp objects, to speak. At the end, she could only move her eyes. I'm sorry, David said, because there was nothing else to say. She made me promise to keep searching for a cure, Rethus continued, to never accept that some things cannot be fixed. When I heard that humans approached medicine with what the council called reckless experimentation, I allowed myself hope. David felt the weight of that hope settle on his shoulders. I'll do everything I can. But you need to understand I might fail. I don't have the resources, the equipment, the knowledge base I would need for something this complex. You are trying, Rethus replied. That is more than the council ever did for us. The elder species said our condition was a natural limitation, that attempting to cure it was hubris. They offered only palliative care and acceptance of fate. The story was familiar. The council preached stability, tradition, acceptance of natural order. They feared change, feared innovation, feared anything that disrupted their carefully maintained balance. It was why they had exiled humanity and the Drine both, not because either species was actually dangerous, but because they refused to simply accept what they were told. 3 weeks after the Drin arrival, Lena managed to grow the first successful crop. She'd combined Drin biological catalysts with human agricultural techniques, creating a hybrid approach that worked despite the cold and darkness. The plants were strange, thick-stalked and pale, but they produced edible fruit that tasted like bland apples. When she harvested the first batch and distributed it to the children, their faces lit up with joy. Simon, the small boy who had asked about the plants every day, bit into a fruit and smiled so wide it brought tears to Lena's eyes. It's good, he announced. It's really good. That evening, both settlements gathered in the main cavern for a shared meal. Humans and Drin sat together, communicating through translators and gestures, sharing food and stories. The Drin told tales of their home world, a place with vast oceans and cities that floated on massive ships. The humans spoke of Earth, of blue skies and green forests and rain that fell without freezing. Owen found himself sitting beside Rethus, watching their people interact. The fear and suspicion that had marked their first meeting had faded, replaced by something that looked almost like friendship. We are stronger together, Rethus observed. 2 exiled people supporting each other. Owen nodded. The council wanted us to fail, to die quietly on some forgotten world. Instead, we found allies. Perhaps, Rethus suggested, his scales rippling with colors David had learned indicated thoughtfulness. That is the council's greatest fear. Not that we are dangerous, but that we might prove we do not need them at all. 4 months into their alliance, the joint settlement had transformed from desperate survival into something approaching stability. Iris stood in the new engineering complex, a cavern expanded by careful melting and reinforcement, where human and Drine technology merged into systems neither species could have imagined alone. The thermal grid now kept the entire settlement at comfortable temperatures. Atmospheric processors enriched the thin air until people could breathe without strain. Even the constant dripping from the ceiling had been channeled into a water collection system that provided fresh drinking water. Lena's gardens flourished in 3 separate caverns, producing enough food to not only sustain the settlement, but create small reserves. Children no longer went to bed hungry. The pale fruits had been joined by protein-rich tubers and vitamin-dense leafy plants, all adapted to grow in the artificial light and enriched soil. She had even started experimenting with flavor, trying to create varieties that tasted like the foods people remembered from home. David had made breakthrough after breakthrough in understanding Drine physiology. Quick swimming and far-seeing showed measurable improvement after he synthesized a compound that supported their neural pathways. It wasn't a cure, but it slowed the progression significantly and restored some function they had lost. Rethus visited the medical facility every day to check on their progress, and David could see the cautious hope growing in the captain's eyes. The settlement now numbered over 400. Small groups of Drin from other exile communities had joined them, drawn by stories of cooperation between species. Families who had been wandering the frontier for years, barely surviving, found a place where they could put down roots. Then the distress signal arrived. Iris detected it first, a weak transmission from the neighboring system. The signal was automated, repeating on multiple frequencies in the universal distress format. She brought the data to Owen and Rethus, who were reviewing expansion plans for additional living quarters. "It's a Quellan transport," Iris explained, displaying the decoded information on a jury-rigged screen. "Civilian vessel, carrying refugees from Queller 4. The planet had an outbreak of something called red fever. The Council quarantined the entire world and declared all survivors contaminated. This ship is trying to reach asylum anywhere that will take them." "And no one will," Owen said quietly. He had heard about the Quellan situation through underground communications. The elder species were terrified of the fever, refusing to risk any contact with those who might be infected. Rethus studied the data with all 4 hands moving across the display. "They are under attack. 4 raider vessels. The raiders know the Quellans are desperate, unable to fight back, abandoned by everyone." "Easy prey, how far?" Owen asked. 6 hours at maximum speed," Iris replied. "But we would need to use both the Wandering Star and the Silverwind, and we would need to arm them." Owen closed his eyes. They had worked so hard to build something here, something peaceful. Going to fight raiders meant risking everything they had created. It meant potentially losing people who had already suffered so much. It meant making themselves visible to elements of the galaxy they had been careful to avoid. "We cannot leave them," Rethus said simply. "We know what it is to be abandoned, to be declared unworthy of help. If we turn away now, we become what we hate." "The Council would never help," Owen replied. "They would say it's not their problem, that the Quellans made their choice by leaving a quarantine zone." "Then we prove we are not the Council," Rethus said. Owen called an emergency meeting in the main cavern. Everyone gathered quickly, sensing the urgency. He explained the situation simply. Refugees under attack, no one else willing to help. A choice between safe isolation and dangerous compassion. "This isn't our fight," Marcus argued. He had grown more bitter since his wife's death, questioning every decision. "We barely survived ourselves. We have children here, families. You want to risk them for strangers?" "I want to be the kind of people who help," Owen replied. "The Council said humanity was too dangerous. Maybe they were right, but not the way they meant. Maybe we're dangerous because we refuse to look away when others suffer." "I will lead the Silverwind," Rethus announced. "Any Drin who wish to stay may do so with honor. This is a choice, not an order." Every single Dren volunteered. The humans were more divided, but enough stepped forward to crew the Wandering Star. Iris would command the ship's weapons systems. David would lead the medical team. Frank and Rachel would coordinate tactical operations despite having no real military training. The next hours passed in frantic preparation. Both ships had been partially cannibalized for settlement construction. Now that process reversed as Iris and the Drin engineers reinstalled systems and jury-rigged weapons from salvaged parts. The Wandering Star's original defensive lasers were restored. The Silverwind's more substantial armaments were brought back online. Neither ship was built for combat, but they would have to be enough. Lena found David in his quarters packing medical supplies. "You don't have to go," she said quietly. "You're too important here." "That's exactly why I have to go," David replied. "If there are injured people on that transport, they'll need a doctor." "Would you have me hide while others suffer?" "I would have you alive," Lena said. "I would have you here where you're safe, where you're needed." David paused in his packing and took her hands. Over the months of survival, they had grown close, finding comfort in shared exhaustion and small moments of peace. He had been planning to tell her how he felt, to ask if she might feel the same. But there was no time now. "If I don't come back," he started. "Don't," Lena interrupted. "Don't say that. Just come back." The 2 ships launched into Frosthold's perpetually gray sky, leaving behind a settlement full of people who could only wait and hope. In the Wandering Star's command section, Owen watched the moon shrink below them and wondered if he had just made the last mistake of his leadership. Beside him, Iris checked weapon systems she had never fired, systems she hoped would work when needed. On the Silverwind, Rethus addressed his crew in their native language, speaking words of honor and duty that had been passed down through Drin culture for generations. Quick swimming and far-seeing had insisted on coming, wanting to prove that their improving condition made them valuable. Rethus had reluctantly agreed, placing them in protected positions away from potential combat. The journey to the neighboring system took 6 hours of tense silence. Everyone aboard both ships knew they were flying toward violence, toward danger, toward a situation where they were likely outgunned and outmatched. But they flew anyway because looking away would mean becoming something they refused to be. As they dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the scene before them was chaos. The Quellan transport, a massive civilian vessel designed for luxury travel, drifted helplessly while 4 sleek raider corvettes circled like predators. Weapons fire lit up the space between them, the raiders systematically destroying the transport's engines and life support. They weren't trying to destroy the ship. They were trying to take it intact, along with whatever cargo and passengers could be sold. "They don't know we're here yet," Iris reported. "We have maybe 60 seconds before they detect us." Owen took a breath, feeling the weight of 300 lives back on Frosthold. The hundreds aboard the transport, the people on both rescue ships all looking to him for leadership. He was just a colony administrator who had never wanted to be a hero. But the galaxy had made its choice about humanity, and now humanity would make its choice about itself. "All ships," Owen commanded. "We did not come this far to watch others die. Whatever happens next, we go forward together. Attack." The Wandering Star and the Silverwind accelerated toward the battle, their improvised weapons charging, their crews scared but determined, proving that exile had not broken them, but forged them into something stronger than the galaxy had wanted them to be. The first raider corvette died before it knew it was under attack. Iris had calculated the perfect angle, waiting until the Wandering Star was close enough that the aging laser couldn't miss. The beam cut through the corvette's engine section, and the small ship tumbled away in a shower of sparks and venting atmosphere. The remaining 3 raiders scattered immediately, their crews reacting with the practiced efficiency of criminals who had survived many fights. They were faster than the rescue ships, more maneuverable, and their weapons were military-grade rather than the improvised systems Iris had cobbled together. But they hadn't expected resistance, and that moment of surprise was the only advantage Owen's forces had. "Split formation," Rethus commanded over the communication link. "Draw them away from the transport." The Silverwind broke left while the Wandering Star went right, forcing the raiders to choose targets. 2 followed the Drin ship, recognizing it as the more dangerous opponent. The 3rd came after the humans, weapons already charging. Frank coordinated the Wandering Star's defensive maneuvers from a hastily assembled tactical station. He had been a freight hauler before the exile, used to navigating through asteroid fields and traffic lanes, but never through weapons fire. The first shot from the raider passed close enough that alarms screamed throughout the ship. "Return fire," Owen ordered. Iris triggered the lasers, but the raider pilot was good, rolling away from the beam with ease. Their second exchange of fire was equally unsuccessful. Both ships dancing through the void in a deadly ballet neither was truly trained for. On the Silverwind, Rethus fought with generations of Drin military tradition guiding his hands. The elder species had exiled his people for being too aggressive, too unwilling to give up their warrior culture. Now that culture proved its worth as the Silverwind executed maneuvers that left the 2 pursuing, raiders struggling to maintain targeting locks. Quick Swimming worked the communication systems despite his still recovering motor control, coordinating between ships and monitoring raider transmissions. "The raiders are calling for reinforcements," he reported. "They have 2 more ships in the system, mining an asteroid field. They will arrive in approximately 12 minutes. 12 minutes to disable 3 experienced raider crews and secure the transport. It might as well have been 12 seconds. They didn't have the firepower, the training, or the time. Then David had an idea. He activated the communication system to the Quellan transport, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Dr. David Okonkwo of the human vessel Wandering Star. If anyone aboard the transport can hear this, we need you to boost your distress signal. Maximum power, all frequencies. Make noise." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the transport's transmitters came to life, screaming distress calls so loud they would be heard in every nearby system. It was a gamble, one that could attract more raiders or worse. But it changed the calculation for the attackers. Raiders survived by staying invisible, by operating in the shadows where the Council's limited patrol forces wouldn't notice them. This much noise risked drawing attention they couldn't afford. The raider chasing the Wandering Star broke off, retreating toward his companions. The 3 ships regrouped, holding position but no longer actively attacking. Their leader transmitted in heavily accented trade language. "This is not worth dying for. Withdraw and we forget this happened." Owen almost accepted. Every instinct screamed at him to take the offered escape. to protect his people and return to Frosthold with everyone intact. But he looked at the crippled transport, at the refugees aboard who had nowhere to go and no one to help them. He thought about Earth, about the Council's cold judgment, about being declared unworthy of compassion. "No," Owen replied simply. "You will leave immediately or we will destroy you." It was an absurd threat. The raiders knew as well as Owen did that the rescue ships were barely armed, that they had gotten lucky once but couldn't match experienced fighters in extended combat. But the massive distress signal continued to wail, drawing closer the possibility of Council patrols or other ships. The raiders had to decide if 3 small ships were worth the risk. The calculation took 30 seconds. Then the 3 corvettes turned and accelerated away, jumping to faster-than-light travel as soon as they cleared the transport's gravity well. They would find easier prey elsewhere, targets without help, without allies, without stubborn fools willing to die for strangers. Owen let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Around him, the crew of the Wandering Star erupted in relieved celebration. They had survived. Against every reasonable expectation, they had survived. Silverwind took damage, Iris reported, her joy fading as she reviewed sensor data. Hull breach in their engineering section. Life support compromised. The celebration died instantly. Owen ordered both ships to dock with the Quellan transport, using the larger vessel's systems to coordinate repairs and medical assistance. As airlocks connected and pressure equalized, David gathered his medical team and supplies, preparing for whatever he would find aboard. The Quellan refugees filled every available space in the transport, hundreds of them packed into a ship designed for comfortable travel by perhaps 100 passengers. They were insectoid, with segmented bodies covered in delicate chitin that ranged from deep green to pale yellow. Their large compound eyes reflected the emergency lighting in multiple colors, creating an almost hypnotic effect. Most were families, adults holding young ones close, everyone showing signs of malnutrition and stress. Their leader approached David slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. The translator rendered her clicking speech as a tired but dignified voice. "I am Sareth Nightwing, elder of the Queller 4 refugees. Why did you help us?" "No one else would." David met her multifaceted gaze. "Because you needed help and we could give it. That should be reason enough." Sareth's antennae trembled in a gesture David couldn't interpret. "The Council declared us contaminated. They said helping us would spread the red fever across the galaxy. They said we must die in isolation to protect others." "The Council says a lot of things," David replied, "but I'm a doctor, and I'd like to examine your people if you'll allow it. I need to understand what we're dealing with." Over the next hours, David and his team moved through the transport, treating injuries and evaluating the refugee's condition. What he found disturbed him deeply. The Quellans showed signs of long-term malnutrition and exposure to poor conditions, but not one showed symptoms of red fever. Whatever had ravaged Queller 4, these refugees had either never been infected or had recovered completely. "They're healthy," David reported to Owen. "Malnourished, traumatized, exhausted, but not sick. The Council quarantined them for nothing. Or for something," Owen replied quietly. Queller 4 was a major agricultural world. If the fever destroyed their crops, that would affect food prices throughout Council space. Maybe it was easier to quarantine everyone than to deal with the economic disruption of helping them. It was a cynical view, but after everything they had experienced, cynicism about the Council seemed entirely justified. Rethus approached with quick swimming and far-seeing, all 3 showing signs of exhaustion from the battle. "The Silverwind is damaged but functional. We can return to Frosthold, but the journey will be slower than before." "What about them?" Owen gestured to the Quellan refugees filling the transport. "They cannot stay here," Sareth said, her translated voice carrying resignation. "The transport is dying. Life support fails. Engines are destroyed. We have perhaps 2 days before systems collapse completely." Owen looked at Rethus. They both knew what this moment meant. Taking in the refugees would strain their resources, complicate their security, expose them to more scrutiny from the galaxy that had rejected them. The smart decision would be to provide what help they could and leave. Maybe point the Quellans toward another outlaw station or unclaimed world. "Frosthold has room," Owen said instead. "It's cold and it's hard, but it's home. You would be welcome there." Sareth's entire body seemed to sag with relief. Around them, the Quellan refugees clicked and whistled in their native language. the translator struggling to keep up with overlapping conversations of disbelief and gratitude. As the rescue ships prepared to tow the transport back to Frosthold, David found himself standing with Rethus watching the crews work together. Humans and Drin moved side by side now without hesitation, helping Quellan refugees transfer essential supplies. "This will change everything," Rethus observed. "Word will spread. Other exiles will come seeking refuge. We will no longer be able to hide." "Maybe hiding was never going to work," David replied. "Maybe the only way forward is to show the galaxy that the ones they threw away are building something better than what threw them away." The journey back to Frosthold took 3 days of careful navigation with the damaged Silverwind and crippled transport. Long enough for David to treat the wounded and get to know the Quellan refugees. Long enough for Owen to worry about how to integrate hundreds more people into their settlement. Long enough for everyone to realize that their quiet exile had ended. They had made themselves visible, had demonstrated they would fight for others, had proven they valued compassion over safety. There would be consequences. But as they approached the ice moon that had become their home, Owen felt something he hadn't experienced since Earth: pride. 2 years had transformed Frosthold from a desperate refuge into something that resembled a real community. Simon, the boy who had once asked Lena about her dying plants every day, now ran through corridors lit by stable lighting rather than flickering emergency systems. His laughter echoed off walls that no longer dripped constantly with melting ice. He played with Quellan children whose chittering voices had become as familiar as human speech, and with young Drin who taught him games from their lost homeworld. The settlement had expanded into a network of interconnected caverns that stretched for miles beneath the ice. The original 300 humans had been joined by 400 Drine, 200 Quellans, and a steady stream of others. 50 Torvan miners arrived 6 months after the Quellan rescue. Refugees from a corporate mining operation that had declared them expendable after they tried to organize for basic safety protections. They brought industrial equipment and expertise in working hostile environments. 3 months later came 23 Mirathi scholars who had questioned their theocratic government's interpretation of sacred texts. They were quiet, contemplative beings who glowed with soft bioluminescence, providing natural light wherever they gathered. They established a library in the deepest caverns, collecting knowledge from every species in the settlement. A lone Krell warrior named Stonebreaking Tide arrived seeking asylum after refusing an order to massacre civilian protesters on his homeworld. He was 8 feet of muscle and armored hide, terrifying to look at until you saw him carefully teaching Quellan children how to carve ice sculptures with his massive claws. The settlement now numbered over 1,000 souls from 7 different species, and ships arrived monthly seeking refuge. Some brought supplies, some brought skills, all brought stories of rejection by the so-called civilized galaxy. Frosthold had become a legend in the outlaw networks and fringe colonies, a place where the condemned could find acceptance, where cooperation mattered more than species or origin. Iris had expanded her workshop into a proper engineering facility where humans, Drin and Torvan, worked together on projects that combined their different approaches to technology. They had created a fusion reactor that powered the entire settlement, designed to be both efficient and repairable with common materials. The old salvaged systems from the Wandering Star and Silverwind had been fully integrated into the settlement's infrastructure, their components given new purpose in this unexpected home. Lena's gardens had grown into an agricultural complex that produced surplus food, allowing them to trade with passing ships and build reserves against future hardship. She had created hybrid crops that combined traits from multiple worlds, plants that thrived in conditions that should have been impossible. Quellan farmers worked alongside her, their compound eyes able to see wavelengths of light invisible to humans, optimizing growth in ways Lena would never have discovered alone. David's medical facility had become a research center staffed by healers from multiple species. Together they were making breakthroughs in cross-species medicine, understanding how different biologies could inform treatment of conditions that had seemed incurable. Quick swimming and far-seeing now worked in the facility themselves, their condition stabilized to the point where they could pursue careers in medicine. They were developing treatments for other Drine with the same genetic condition, work that would have been dismissed as impossible by the Council's conservative medical establishment. Owen stood in the main plaza, a vast cavern that served as the settlement's heart, and marveled at what they had built. Market stalls offered goods from a dozen worlds. Children of 4 species played together, inventing games that combined their different abilities. Adults gathered in communal spaces, sharing meals and stories, the boundaries between species becoming less important with each passing day. Rethus approached, his scales showing the patterns of satisfaction and pride. The council's envoy will arrive within the hour. Are you prepared? Owen nodded. The message had come 2 weeks ago. An official representative of the Sovereign Council wished to inspect the settlement at Frosthold to evaluate what the exiles had created. It was the first official contact any of them had received since their banishment. The council had spent 2 years ignoring them, hoping they would simply die quietly. Now they could ignore them no longer. Whatever they want, the answer is no, Owen replied. We're not begging to be let back in. We're not asking for their approval. They can observe, they can evaluate, but we don't answer to them anymore. Some among us fear this is a prelude to military action, Rethus said quietly, that the council will destroy what we have built rather than allow it to exist. Owen had considered that possibility. The council relied on the idea that civilization required their guidance, that the younger species needed elder wisdom to survive. Frosthold proved otherwise. It demonstrated that the exiled, the rejected, the condemned, could not only survive but thrive without the council's help. That was a dangerous idea from their perspective. Then they'll learn we're not helpless anymore, Owen said. We've built defenses, trained security forces, established supply chains. We won't go down easily. The council ship emerged from the gray clouds with grace that spoke of technology far beyond what the settlement possessed. It was sleek and beautiful, a work of art as much as a spacecraft emblazoned with symbols of the Sovereign Council's authority. It landed in the designated area outside the main cavern entrance, its presence a stark reminder of the power differential between the exiles and those who had condemned them. The envoy who emerged was an Archon, one of the eldest species in the galaxy. He stood 9 feet tall, his crystalline body refracting the dim light into rainbow patterns. 4 faces looked out from his multifaceted head, each capable of independent thought and perception. He was called Tellus Foresight, and his very presence demanded respect and deference that the younger species were expected to provide without question. Owen met him at the entrance with Rethus, David, Iris, and representatives from each species in the settlement. They did not bow. They did not offer the traditional gestures of submission that protocol demanded. They simply stood, equals meeting an equal, and waited for him to speak. Tellus's voices harmonized as he addressed them, creating an effect that was both beautiful and unsettling. I am Tellus Foresight, envoy of the Sovereign Council. I have come to inspect this settlement and evaluate the situation of those dwelling here. You're welcome to look around, Owen replied, but understand that we're not seeking your approval or permission. We're simply living our lives. One of Tellus's faces showed an expression that might have been surprise. The younger species were not supposed to address council members with such directness. You were exiled for good reason. Humanity for violence and instability. The Drin for militaristic aggression. The Quellans for quarantine violation. Each species here has been judged unworthy of galactic society. And yet here we are, Rethus said, his scales showing colors of calm confidence. Thriving, cooperating, building something that serves all of us rather than demanding we serve it. I will see this supposed achievement for myself, Tellus declared. Over the next 6 hours, Tellus toured the settlement with his entourage of aides and observers. Owen and the other leaders accompanied him, answering questions with honest directness that clearly unsettled the Archon. They showed him the fusion reactor that humans, Drin, and Torvin had designed together. The agricultural complex where multiple species approaches to farming had created abundance from nothing. The medical facility where cross-species research was advancing faster than anything in council space, because it wasn't constrained by centuries of cautious tradition. In the residential sections, Tellus observed families of different species living side by side, helping each other, sharing resources. He watched Drin children playing with human children, both groups being supervised by a Marathi teacher, whose soft glow provided perfect lighting for their studies. He saw a Krell warrior patiently teaching Torvin miners how to reinforce tunnel structures, combining his species' natural strength with their technical expertise. In the market, he witnessed trade conducted in multiple languages, with humans using translation devices to haggle with Quellan merchants, with Dren offering repairs in exchange for prepared meals, with the complex web of mutual support that made the community function. This should not work, Tellus finally said, his 4 voices showing confusion across his faces. 7 species, all exiled for instability or danger. You should be fighting among yourselves, struggling to survive, proving the Council's judgment correct. Why? David asked simply. Because that's what you expected? Because you need us to fail to justify what you did to us? The Council maintains order across thousands of systems, Tellus replied. We have done so for millions of years. This requires difficult decisions, removal of destabilizing elements, preservation of the balance that keeps civilization stable. Your order failed us, Lena said quietly. She had joined the group, still wearing the dirt-stained work clothes from the gardens. When the Quellans needed help, you quarantined them to die. When humans asked for a chance, you exiled us. When the Drin wanted to maintain their own defense, you cast them out. Your order is built on abandoning anyone who doesn't fit perfectly into your system. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary for the greater good, Tellus argued. Easy to say when you're not the one being sacrificed, Owen shot back. We've built something different here. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. We don't have your resources or your technology, or your millions of years of history. What we have is each other, and apparently that's enough. Tellus was silent for a long moment, his 4 faces showing conflicting expressions. Finally, he spoke with voices that sounded less certain than before. What is it you want? Are you seeking readmission to galactic society? Forgiveness? Recognition? We want to be left alone, Owen said simply. We're not asking for your permission to exist. We're not begging to come back. We're informing you that we're here, we're staying, and we'll welcome anyone else you decide to throw away. Build your order without us. We'll build our own. The Council will not tolerate an independent settlement of exiles, Tellus warned. You represent a challenge to our authority, a suggestion that our judgment can be wrong. Your judgment was wrong, Rethis stated flatly. We are the proof. Every person here, every species, was condemned as dangerous or unworthy. Yet we have built peace while your Council maintains order through exile and abandonment. Perhaps you should consider what that says about your system. Tellus departed soon after, his ship rising into the gray sky without ceremony. His final words were ambiguous, neither promising action nor offering recognition. Owen watched him go and felt no satisfaction, only resignation. The Council would respond somehow. That was inevitable. Whether they chose military force, economic pressure, or simply continued isolation remained to be seen. That evening, the entire settlement gathered in the main plaza for what had become a weekly tradition. Each species shared stories, songs, or customs from their home worlds. The Marathi created light displays that danced across the cavern ceiling. The Drin performed synchronized movements that told tales of ancient battles. Humans played music on instruments cobbled together from salvaged materials. Quellans clicked and whistled melodies that required their unique vocal structures. Simon sat with his parents, surrounded by friends from multiple species, eating food that combined ingredients from several worlds. He was warm, he was safe, he was happy. He didn't remember Earth except as vague impressions. Frosthold was his home. These people were his community, and he couldn't imagine anywhere else he would rather be. Owen stood at the edge of the gathering, watching his people celebrate. Lena found him there, slipping her hand into his. They had finally admitted their feelings for each other 6 months ago, finding joy in the quiet moments between challenges. What do you think the Council will do? She asked. I don't know, Owen admitted. But whatever they decide, we'll face it together. All of us, that's what we've built here. Not just a settlement, but a family made of choice rather than birth. They exiled us, hoping we would disappear. Instead, we've proven that friendship, cooperation, and simple human decency are more powerful than any authority. David joined them, still wearing his medical coat, taking a break from the facility where Farseeing was working late on a promising treatment protocol. Iris appeared next, her hands stained with grease from her latest project. Rethis approached with quick swimming, both showing the scale patterns of contentment. Stonebreaking Tide arrived carrying 3 Quellan children on his massive shoulders, their clicking laughter mixing with his deep rumbling chuckles. They stood together, leaders of 7 species watching their community celebrate life in a place that should have been their grave. The cold still howled outside, storms still raged across Frosthold's frozen surface, and the galaxy still considered them exiles and outcasts. But here, in these warm caverns filled with light and laughter, they had found something the Sovereign Council, with all its ancient wisdom, had never truly understood. That home wasn't a place granted by authority, but something built by people who refused to abandon each other in the endless dark.